When I handed over my power of attorney before shipping out overseas, I thought my mom would use it to manage my mail and ensure my bills were paid on time. I never imagined she'd hand my social security number directly to my sister. After coming home to find $42,000 in maxed-out credit debt across 3 separate accounts, my mom just looked me in the eye and said, "She was struggling, and you weren't using your credit anyway." I didn't want a family war, but the banks gave me a choice: pay off debt I never spent, or file the identity theft report. I chose to protect my future. 11 days after filing that police report, my phone lit up with a hysterical call from my mom, screaming about a massive legal consequence I hadn't even known was coming. My name is Rachel. I'm 27 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I believed that blood was thicker than water, especially when it came to family. I've always been the organized, practical one in our house. Ever since my early 20s, I worked hard to build a spotless financial foundation. I budgeted every paycheck, paid off my student loans early, and kept my credit score floating in the high 700s. I had a clear vision for my future: buy my own home by 30 and establish complete independence. My 24-year-old sister, Chloe, was the exact opposite. Living life from one emergency to another, she moved through jobs like seasonal clothes, always expecting someone else to pick up the pieces when her bank account hit zero. My mother, Brenda, enabled every single bit of it. Whenever Chloe blew her rent money on designer clothes or weekend trips she couldn't afford, Mom was right there to bail her out, or guilt-trip me into helping my little sister. When my deployment orders arrived, requiring me to spend 10 months overseas on an extended military logistics contract, I knew I needed someone back home to manage my mail and keep an eye on my personal affairs. I needed a trusted anchor. Against my better judgment, I turned to my mother. She was thrilled, reassuring me that she'd keep everything secure in the safe at her house. To make things simple, I signed a limited power of attorney, strictly authorizing her to handle my local mail, forward important tax documents, and manage my physical property while I was halfway across the world. Looking back, the warning signs were already there. Chloe's sudden, unspoken jealousy of the steady income I'd be earning while away, and Mom's lingering comments about how blessed I was to be financially comfortable while Chloe was struggling. But as I packed my bags and boarded that flight, I convinced myself that no matter our differences, my family would always protect my back. I was completely wrong. The day I landed back on home soil felt like a fresh beginning. 10 long months of dusty heat, long shifts, and strict discipline were finally behind me. I had saved up a solid nest egg, and I was ready to execute the next phase of my life, buying my very first starter home. 2 weeks after arriving, I walked into the local credit union with a smile, my pre-approval paperwork filled out, ready to lock in a mortgage rate. The loan officer, a polite man named Mr. Vance, reviewed my income documents and praised my service record. But when he pulled up my credit profile, his friendly demeanor suddenly shifted. He frowned, adjusted his glasses, and looked at me with a mixture of confusion and pity. "Ms. Miller," he said, turning the monitor toward me, "I'm sorry, but there's no way we can approve this application. In fact, I'm surprised you weren't flagged by our system automatically." My heart did a slow, painful drop. I stared at the screen. My once pristine credit score hadn't just dipped, it had plummeted into the mid-500s. Beneath my name sat 3 separate revolving credit accounts, 2 high-tier reward cards, and a major store credit line, all opened within 2 months of my departure. Every single one was maxed out to the absolute limit. Worse, they were all sitting in 90-day default status, with late fees compounding and collection agencies actively preparing to take legal action. The total balance outstanding was $42,150. I sat there, frozen, the air knocked straight out of my lungs. I told Mr. Vance there had to be a mistake, a mix-up with another Rachel Miller. But as he printed out the full credit bureau report, the paper trail told a chillingly clear story. The cards had been applied for online using my social security number, my date of birth, and my military income stats. But the billing address listed wasn't my apartment. It was my mother's house. The statements were being delivered straight to her mailbox, the very mail I had trusted her to manage. The confirmation emails, the digital statements, the physical cards, everything had passed directly through her hands. Standing in the parking lot outside the bank with the printouts trembling in my grip, the terrible truth settled in. This wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't a random hacker overseas. The call was coming from inside the house. I drove straight to my mother's house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My blood was boiling, but beneath the rage was a deep, nauseating sorrow. I kept hoping for some absurd explanation, some wild misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew the truth. When I pushed open the front door, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen island, sipping coffee while Chloe lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone. On her feet was a pair of brand-new, expensive designer sneakers. Around her wrist sparkled a genuine gold bracelet. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together with sickening precision. Without saying a word, I slammed the stack of credit reports onto the table in front of my mother. Mom flinched, looking down at the papers. For a fraction of a second, panic flashed across her face, but she quickly covered it with a blanket of cool indifference. Chloe glanced up from her phone, her expression shifting from bored to instantly defensive. "What is this, Mom?" My voice shook, barely holding back the tide of anger. "Who opened 3 credit lines in my name while I was deployed?" Chloe scoffed, leaning back. "Oh, calm down, Rachel. It's not that big of a deal. I was going to pay it back once my business idea took off." "Not a big deal?" I yelled, turning on her. "You stole my identity. You maxed out over $42,000 in my name and destroyed my credit score. I just got denied a mortgage because of you." That was when my mother stood up, placing a soothing hand on Chloe's shoulder rather than looking at me. She looked me dead in the eye, her tone entirely lacking remorse or shame. "Rachel, stop dramatizing this," Mom said, her voice dripping with patronizing calm. "Your sister was going through a really hard time while you were gone. Her car broke down, her rent went up, and she needed a fresh start. You were overseas making good military pay, saving up thousands, and you weren't using your credit anyway. It was just sitting there." I stared at her, utterly speechless. "So, you gave her my social security number? You used my power of attorney to open fraudulent accounts. Family helps family." Mom snapped, finally raising her voice. "You have plenty of money, Rachel. Chloe didn't have anything. Why are you being so selfish over numbers on a screen?" Looking at the two of them standing side by side, I realized they didn't care about the law, my hard work, or my future. To them, my financial success wasn't something I'd earned. It was just shared family property waiting to be looted. The next morning, I sat in the office of the credit union's fraud department. The fraud investigator, a woman named Investigator Hayes, laid out the harsh reality in front of me with zero sugarcoating. "Ms. Miller, because your name and credentials were used, the lenders view these debts as legally yours until proven otherwise," she explained, tapping her pen against the file. "You have 2 choices here. Option A, you sign a repayment agreement today, taking full personal responsibility for the $42,000 and try to settle with the collection agencies over time. Option B, you file a formal affidavit of identity theft, which requires a full police report. That shifts the liability off you, but it means an active criminal investigation will be launched against whoever opened those accounts." $42,000. That was nearly my entire savings for my deployment. Money earned through grueling 10-hour shifts in dusty, hostile conditions while miles away from home. Paying it meant setting my life back 5 years. When I texted Mom telling her I had no choice but to file the police report, my phone instantly exploded. Calls came in every 30 seconds. Then came the barrage of frantic, guilt-tripping messages. "How can you do this to your own sister? If Chloe gets a criminal record, her life is over. You are destroying this family over money. You're heartless." My mother even called my aunts and uncles, turning them against me. Within hours, extended family members I hadn't spoken to in months were sending me texts calling me a selfish monster. The emotional pressure was suffocating, wrapping around my chest like a tight coil. I sat in my car outside the police station for an hour, tears blurring my vision, questioning if I was doing the right thing. Then I looked down at the credit statements again. I saw charges for five-star resort weekends, high-end boutiques, expensive dinners, and spa days. Chloe hadn't used my credit to buy groceries or pay emergency medical bills. She had used my name to fund a luxurious lifestyle she couldn't afford, while Mom happily guarded the door. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and opened the car door. I walked into the precinct, sat down across from an officer, and filed the identity theft report. I gave them every document, every address, and every statement. I wasn't doing it out of revenge. I was doing it to survive. After handing over the official police report to the banks and credit bureaus, an eerie, heavy silence descended. For 11 straight days, my family completely cut me off. No frantic phone calls, no guilt-tripping text messages, no angry voicemails. My mother and sister had cast me out as the family villain, choosing to ignore my existence entirely. I used those 11 quiet days to focus on piecing my life back together. The credit bureaus had frozen the fraudulent accounts, and the long, slow process of cleaning up my credit report was officially underway. It was painful, but for the first time since landing back home, I felt a sense of control returning. I assumed the police would eventually issue a simple summons or a fine to Chloe for credit card fraud, forcing her to finally take some responsibility. I was completely unprepared for how fast and hard the situation was actually escalating behind the scenes. On the 11th day, at exactly 7:45 a.m., my phone began ringing uncontrollably. It was my mother. When I answered, there was no greeting, just pure, breathless hysteria echoing through the speaker. She was sobbing so hard she could barely form coherent sentences, her voice pitching into a high-pitched screech that forced me to pull the phone away from my ear. "You ruined her," Mom screamed, her words broken by sharp gasps for air. "You cruel, ungrateful monster." They came to the house. They handcuffed your sister in front of the entire neighborhood. My stomach did a sudden, violent flip. "Mom, calm down."
What are you talking about?
"The police," she wailed. "They showed up with a warrant. They didn't just question her, Rachel. They arrested her. They're charging her with grand larceny and identity theft." Then came the real shocker, the part one hadn't even known was coming. When the detective had started investigating the fraudulent accounts I reported, he didn't stop at the 3 credit cards. Following the paper trail back to my mother's IP address, financial crimes detectives had uncovered a far larger, systematically hidden scheme. While I was deployed, my sister hadn't just used my credit, she and my mother had misused my signed power of attorney to open unauthorized online bank accounts, forge my signature on secondary loan applications, and attempt to intercept federal tax refunds. What I thought was a simple case of 3 stolen credit cards was actually a massive, multi-tiered paper trail of financial fraud. The police report I filed hadn't just flagged a bad credit score, it had pulled the loose thread on a major criminal operation. And now, the entire wall was coming down on both of them. Within hours of Chloe's arrest, my phone turned into a war zone. The extended family, who had previously sent vague messages telling me to be reasonable, went into absolute overdrive. My Aunt Karen called me 3 times in a row, accusing me of throwing my own flesh and blood to the wolves. My uncle sent a long email claiming that no amount of money was worth putting a family member behind bars. The pressure to drop the charges was relentless. My mother even drove to my apartment, pounding on the door for 20 minutes while sobbing through the wood, begging me to go to the police station and tell them it was all a giant misunderstanding. "Just tell them you gave her permission," she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "Tell them you forgot. If you don't drop this, Chloe is facing actual prison time." Standing on the other side of that door, holding back my own tears, I knew I had to hold the line. "I can't drop the charges, Mom," I said softly through the door. "Even if I wanted to, the state is prosecuting this now, not me. You both made this choice when you stole my identity and forged my name." The legal hammer fell quickly. Because the total fraudulent amount exceeded $40,000, and because it involved the illegal misuse of a military power of attorney while I was deployed, the state prosecutor took a hardline stance. Chloe was formally indicted on multiple felony counts, including grand larceny, identity theft, and scheme to defraud. When it became clear that I wouldn't perjure myself to save them, Chloe's public defender advised her to take a plea deal to avoid a long prison sentence. She pled guilty to felony identity theft. The court sentenced her to 3 years of probation, 500 hours of mandatory community service, and ordered her to pay full restitution back to the credit card companies. My mother didn't escape unscathed either. Because she had actively signed off on documents using my power of attorney to facilitate the fraud, she was named as an accomplice in a civil countersuit by the lenders, leaving her personally liable for thousands in legal fees and damages. The family dynamic was completely shattered, but the truth was finally out in the open. It has been 6 months since the courtroom doors closed on my sister's sentencing. The silence from my family is permanent now, but for the first time in my life, that silence feels like peace rather than punishment. With the official police reports, court records, and fraud affidavits submitted, the credit bureaus completely wiped all 3 fraudulent credit lines from my record. My credit score has steadily climbed back into the high 700s, right where it belongs. Last week, I walked back into the credit union, sat down across from Mr. Vance, and officially signed the final mortgage papers for my very own 3-bedroom house. Moving my boxes into my new home, I looked around at the clean, quiet living room and felt a profound sense of relief. It took going through a nightmare to realize that blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to destroy your life. Setting hard boundaries with family is terrifying, especially when everyone around you is telling you to stay silent and keep the peace. But sacrificing your own future to protect someone else's entitlement isn't love, it's enabling. I've rebuilt my life on my own terms, with a clear financial path, absolute independence, and a secure future that no one can ever steal from me again. Now, I'm curious about you listening to my story today. If you found yourself in my shoes, facing a ruined future while your family begged you to cover up a betrayal, what would you have done? Would you have protected your sister, or would you have filed that police report? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen for another wild story. Thank you for watching.